Hello, I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to The Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. With silage season on the way, expert Joe Patton talks about striking the balance between silage quality and quantity.
The story on silage quality is it's a rather depressing one, if I'm honest. I know speaking to Pádraig O'Reilly from Teagasc Grange, who spent a long time, he spent a career doing some brilliant work on silage, tracked this some years ago, 2 years ago now at this stage, to look at how silage quality has evolved over the last 30 years in Ireland. And effectively, you know, in 1985, early 80s, we were making silage of DMD of about 65%. As of last year, we're still making silage with a DMD of 65%. So despite all the additional technology, despite all the improvements in machinery, et cetera, and the increased understanding at research level and advisory level, we're still stuck in poor enough quality silage overall, if we're honest. I mean, 65 DMD silage is equivalent to the needs really of a sort of a circular cow for the winter time. It doesn't have any place in the diet of young stock. It doesn't have any place in the diet of milking cows, certainly. And for dairy herds which are now moving to maybe, extending their lactations in the autumn part of the period, the autumn season, and maybe calving more compactly in the spring, we do need better silage than that to repair our dry cows. So it's a depressing enough story when you look at the quality of silage. It's not a good story, really, to be honest.
And what are the main factors driving this? Or I suppose to turn it on its head, what are the main factors that we need to implement to maximise quality?
Okay, there's a huge amount on this, and I suppose I have my own opinions on it. That when you look at how silage quality has evolved, really, there are a couple of issues on it, really. I suppose in terms of suckler systems, from a beef point of view, the suckler systems have focused a lot on the fact that it's suckler cow, and they seem to dominate the thinking there. But on the dairy side, we're coming from, I suppose, a tradition of 30 years of about 30 years or more of a quota system where we managed our systems with minimising the cost per tonne of dry matter of dry cow feed. We had very long dry periods, so we had dry periods of 12, 14 weeks in duration, and we produced very, very little. Our stocking rates were kept lower, so we didn't have very little. We had relatively little production from silage. Now, if you look at where that has evolved to very quickly over the last few years, you look now and say that for most farms, they're going to need about 1.4. They're going to need to be safe, probably 1.4, 1.5 tonnes of dry matter per cow in the herd, which is, it's a lot of silage, but it's needed, as we've seen this year, in terms of reserves. Now, what you have to remember with that is that even for a spring calving herd, if we take the dry cow requirement, which is 68, 70 DMD, which is really your 1st of June type silage, that accounts for about half of the requirement. So sort of 70 days dry at 11 kilos, you're talking about half of the silage needed is standard dry cow quality. The other half should be, over 72, 74 and upwards for spring calving herd, and you also take into account your young stock, then they also need silage of that type of quality. So really, we probably just need to be a little bit more ambitious in terms of what we want to do and plan our silage out, that we say, okay, we need 800 kilos dry matter of dry cow feed, but everything else made on the farm should be 72, 74 plus.
And what's going to drive that in terms of our practices, like say fertiliser, cutting dates, that kind of thing? I think
the main driver on that is stage of maturity at cutting. Okay, so once you reach heading date, so once heading date is reached, the crop is probably still in the low to mid 70s. But when you see seed heads emerging, Emma Louise, are now in a situation where digestibility of the crop will decline by anywhere from a half a unit to a unit per day. So a crop this week that's at 74, give it 10 days, it'll be at 65. There's a very short window, and it's really around heading date that dictates that. So I suppose in a nutshell, what we're trying to do is ensure that our crops are ready to cut in advance of heading date. So that really means that our silage crop we should have enough yield on the field by sort of the 20th, 25th of May that we can cut decent quality. If we want to let it run on to the 1st of June, or some of it run on to the 1st of June to make dry cow feed out of it, that's fair enough. But I think what's happening at farm level is probably that due to low soil fertility in many cases, we end up delaying first cut to bulk the silage up because of poor soil fertility. And because of that, then we end up with a first cut crop that has effectively gone to head. And at that stage, DMDs are gone. So the real message, I suppose, is that what we want to do is ensure that our soil fertility and our nitrogen application rates are such that we have a good crop ready to cut by the 20th of May, and after that it becomes a management decision.
I suppose, just to re-emphasise that's a huge figure. A 0.5 to 1 unit of a decline in quality per day after your heading date. That's really huge.
Well, I think we know this from, and as dairy farmers, I think that the understanding and the application of very good management principles from a grazing point of view has really improved over the last 10 years. Like there's, the really, really excellent grassland managers out there now. And what is the key thing that people look for when they're managing their swards is that they want to graze their sward at the appropriate time. They want to graze their sward at a 3-leaf stage when it's got high leaf content and before it shoots out or goes to stem. And that stands to reason that if you do that, you produce a quality grass product that the cow can perform on. The very same principle applies with silage, that if we can get our swards cut with a high leaf content, we can ensure decent quality. Now, of course, we're not talking here certainly for a spring calving situation, we're not talking that we have to make, really, really rocket fuel, high quality, award winning silage all the time. But what we are saying is that the quality relative to what we're doing at the moment has to improve by 5 or 6 digestibility points on average. So that really means when you count that back, Emily, that effectively nationally we have to advance our silage cutting date by 7 to 10 days on average.
Just when we consider the quality required for different stock on the farm, you mentioned maybe 68 DMD for your dry cow and 72 for your milking cow. Say for your standard spring calving cow in the shoulder, 72 would be adequate. What sort of quality do we need for young and growing stock?
Yeah, well, I would say that, to try and simplify this thing and not make it, not that we have loads of different types of silage in the yard, I would sort of say, yeah, absolutely, your 68, 70 is your dry cow feed, and that everything above that should be sort of over 72, 72, 74 and up. Okay, so for your young stock, if you can achieve that type of silage for young stock, so 72, 73 and upwards, the growth capacity of young stock or for dairy heifers is much improved. Like really, what we've seen and from experience over the last number of years is that good quality silage like that. So let's say 73, 74 DMD silage with young stock, 1.5 kilo to 1.5 kilos will achieve your growth rate. Sorry, kilo to 1.5 kilos of good quality concentrate plus that silage, you will get adequate growth over the winter period. If your silage is down at 65, 66, 67 with young stock, almost irrespective of the concentrate fed, you'll struggle to make the gains. And it's a feature now of it actually when people have been tracking growth rates on young stock over the summer and winter period, on many farms what we can see is that growth rates in summer excellent, growth rates into the autumn excellent, growth rates in the first winter they flatline, and less than 0.5 kilo growth rate per day, meaning that heifers tend, even if they have gone into the shed in good nick, they come out behind target, and then we're relying on compensatory growth to catch up. And as we know, this year that didn't happen. So a lot of heifers came out underweight and stayed underweight. So certainly your milking cow silage and your young stock silage, consider them as the same required quality. So that should be cut by with a good quality sward, that should be cut in and around the 20th of May there, 22nd of May thereabouts. Your first cuts, your dry cow silage is more like early June or maybe second cut.
And in terms of the quantity then, you were saying around 11 kilograms for dry matter for your dry cow. What sort of quantities per day will your in-calf heifer and your heifer calf consume?
Yeah, well, your heifer calf, I suppose, overall, you'd count it, their total intake would be over 2% of their body weight per day. So on average, you're talking over the first winter, something around 5 kilos dry matter. You'd allow for sort of 5 kilos dry matter of silage plus the meal on top of that for your younger stock, right? So if you count that up for even a 120-day winter, which might be the case for some farms, that's kind of 600 kilos roughly dry matter of good quality silage for the winter for your weanling heifer, which equates to about 3 bales. So 3 bales of good quality silage per heifer. Okay, so take your standard 100 cows, Emma Louise, for handiness. You say 30% replacement rate thereabouts. You've got 30 heifers on a farm of that scale, which is really 330s, but 90 bales of good quality. Okay, so it doesn't come to a lot for a farm of that scale. Planning to make sort of 90 odd bales of really good quality silage for young stock is well within the management capabilities of farms of that size. But we still need to plan it out, do you know what I mean?
And then your in-calf heifers, Joe?
You could take your in-calf heifers as maybe 10% less than the dry cow, so maybe 9 to 10 kilograms dry matter for them, in and around.
That's a really good guide for farmers. When farmers are considering, say, doing a winter feed budget, is there a tool or some sort of a package they can work on as a template to calculate their total herd requirements?
Sure. There's like Teagasc have there's a fodder and feed worksheet. There's a hard copy on paper, and also all the local Teagasc advisors, dairy or dry stock, will have a computer version of that as well if you want to play around with the numbers. So certainly there are plenty of options available around that. So it's important, I suppose, to highlight that. All right, that your advisor will help you on the individual farm requirements. But as I say, maybe the most important change I would like to see coming from that is that rather than us saying I need 1,000 tons of silage, what we should be saying is I need 600 tons of good quality silage and I need 400 tons of dry cow silage. That simple change in how we look at planning it out can make an awful difference.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Joe.
Okay.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast. And my thanks to Joe Patton for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.